Thank you very much. I think before we discuss the future, we cannot fail to establish where we stand today. The incidence of armed conflict and terrorist act has increased in the couple of years, as was discussed this morning. Ongoing events in North Africa and the Middle East could further heighten domestic and international tensions and increase disruption in trade, tourism, and financial flows. Europe, at the same time, where we stand as members, is facing also testing challenges of unprecedented flows of refugees, feeling of skepticism and threatening EU, which are threatening EU governance. After 8 years of struggling with the aftermath of the global financial crisis and subsequent recession, followed by the national debt crisis, bringing about a number of bailouts for a certain number of countries. So after all that, the EU unfortunately has very little to show for that in terms of success. We just look at the last 8 years and compare them to the 8 years before the crisis, or even comparing them across the Atlantic. In Europe, we can say we have had a very poor show. Very embarrassing indeed. This, in spite of a raft of regulations, financial and economic ones, which we have enacted, both in the Parliament and the Council, month after month after month after month, for the last 8 years, and we're still at it. We have put in place a European Systemic Risk Board, a financial risk and stability network with the EBA, the ESMA, IOPA, the banking union with its single supervisory mechanism, the Bank Recovery and Resolution Directive and the Single Resolution Fund. For example, in Malta, the banks would know, they have to save 88 million over to fill up this fund. The backstops provided by the government, the EU-wide, the Eurozone-wide EFSF and the ESM, the European Stability Mechanism, to which Malta has contributed 3.2% of GDP. Now, I'm not critical of these institutions. Of course, these structures had to be put into place. However, the outcome of their operation and management has not helped the EU outshine the US in its economic performance. Just look at the growth of employment in Europe, in the EU and the US, or the rate of unemployment, how it went down in the US, while grew and still at high levels in the EU. So if you go by the proof of the pudding is in the eating, we have the EU is so much concerned, hasn't managed its own economic affairs, even in investment and funding, is very not a pretty sight either. Big companies flush with monies, but no appetite where to invest. All things, remaining equal, we're talking in relative terms. A bold plan by the name of Juncker Plan has still to show certain results. It was supposed to fill up where there are market failures to be made up by the EIB. So where does all this leave the region, the MENA region, which we're interested in? We have a population of 155 million living in middle income, I must admit, according to the World Bank. And at the time of the Arab Spring, it had some strengths. It had a very young and educated population with lots of ambitions. Unfortunately, some of them, or most of them, destroyed. But also, as a positive factor, it was that the financial crisis left them unscathed. So they were not hit directly by the crisis. Today, it's a different story. It's a combination, of course, through the events which we are all familiar with, a combination of subdued economic recovery, together with cheap oil for some countries, especially oil producers, regional programs, the average growth is estimated to be around 3%, which is much well below the potential. As a concluding point, Mr. Chairman, I would like as an idea to compare and contrast the Eastern European countries after the breakup of the Soviet Union and the MENA countries today. Yes, both regions are considered emerging, but with big differences. The Eastern European country had clear, doable targets, that of joining the EU, which most of them did, using an established phased program by a very well developed region, which is the EU itself. The fact that they embraced liberal markets and started in an aggressive way a program of privatization, and also had the distrust of central government, to which they were fed up with. And also, I think worth mentioning here that they had a specialized and very well focused development bank, which was the EBRD. I'm not saying that the EIB and the World Bank are not involved, but the fact that they had a focused bank for their specific problems. I admit this topic of comparing banks and so on is a sensitive one. The two banks are, the World Bank and the EBRD, are represented here, so I have to watch what I say. But, and also I have a lot of respect for the EIB. But the MENA region has its economic peculiarities. We've always talked about a Mediterranean development bank, fine. But today, they do have certain peculiarities more than ever. The high fiscal deficits and debts in the MENA region, the high youth unemployment, the lethargic bureaucracies haven't changed their attitude since then. And a lack of regional connectivity. Just going from Rabat in Malta to Rabat in Morocco took me 14 hours. I could have gone to New York instead. So we're so close and so far. So we do need a development bank which is completely focused and which understands this region. A bank which is ready to handhold nascent projects all the way. A bank which carries out peer reviews for the region specifically. And because peer review is so important, as we have found out in the European Union itself. The EBRD has been given that remit and is already operating in two of countries, to my knowledge, Jordan and Morocco. But more is required. On our side, as Malta, we must state that we are very interested in the development of this region. We can also help. As honest brokers, we're friendly to all. We also, as a European Union member country, the southernmost Union member country, closest to North Africa, with English as our official language for anybody who wants to do business. Maltese as also another official language, which is as very close as can be to Arabic, puts us in a special place. And with a fully developed financial center, we can have international agencies and companies in general doing business in Malta for the region. So using Malta as a peaceful business base. With that thought, I think I will end my speech. Thank you.